All right, thanks, man, for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
So, Ralph, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got started into this business, and what you're doing.
Uh, so I'm in the business for about 20 years now, which is crazy that it's that long. But I got in around 2001, 2002. It was right after the dot-com bubble had just kind of burst. So there wasn't a great economy when I graduated college, and I had no really idea what I wanted to do. My first job was I took a sales job as a copier salesman for Canon, where I was walking door to door in Manhattan, which was
Wow.
awful. And then I decided I was going to try to find something else. I found the job with Enterprise Rent a Car. There's like a management training program. And I had talked to one of my high school friends who had just gotten out of the Navy and he was working in mortgages. And he was like, dude, you're not going to rent cars. He's like, I can get you into the training program here. It's no salary, but um, mortgages is good right now. It's a new company. They're going to be publicly traded at some point. Like, come try it out. So it was like a 1 month training course. And then they put me on the phones. And you didn't have to be licensed back then.
Okay.
So that was really my start in the mortgage business. That's how I got started in it. And I was with that company and kind of rode that until 2007, 2008 when the market crashed. And they stopped. At that point, we had been acquired by Deutsche Bank. And Deutsche Bank just shut down the lending division. They were like, screw this. And then the next 3 or 4 years was like a bumpy ride. I went through, I think, 3 or 4 companies that closed within like
Wow.
months. Um, but I stayed. I stayed kind of out of pride and out of like I didn't know what else to do when I was in a ton of debt and I lost all my income. So I was like, I'm going to try to do what I want to do. And at the time when the market crashed, I was a vice president at Deutsche Bank, and I went back to being a loan after like 6 months of fighting it. I went back to being a loan officer, and it was the best move I could make at the time, and it enabled me the ability to earn money again in a tough market. So I'm kind of always thankful I have that skill because I can always go back to it. I feel.
So, when you were bouncing around in these other companies, you weren't being a loan officer, you were still more management.
I kind of say this. I have this book that just came out. It's called The Growth Trap, and I speak about this a lot. It's kind of like the underlying story in the book. And what I speak about during this time is that I was walking around the streets as a 27 and a 20-year-old kid, um, like I'm a vice president of a publicly traded company. The problem was I wasn't a vice president anymore. I was nothing. So I took. This is funny. The first job I took was a guarantee with a company called IndyMac, and they were like, "We'll give you it was like the equivalent of like $120,000 a year guarantee for like 6 months because we believe that you have a good book of business. You can come over. So I was like, great. And before I even started, they closed. I got like a notification they were closing. So that was one. Then I took a job with another company that was a new startup in the mortgage business. It was somebody I knew from my previous companies. Like, I'll give you a guarantee of like 7,000 a month. And I was like, great. And I went and sat around there for like 3 or 4 months with nothing happening until they started bouncing checks, and I was like, I gotta get out of here. But the problem was is that because I was getting the guaranteed money, I wasn't changing any of my habits. I was like, all right, this patches a hole for right now. It wasn't enough money for me to live because I had all these bills. I had like $1 million in debt between houses and stuff like that. So it wasn't enough money for me to live, but it was just enough money for me not to have to make a decision.
Right.
So it really was stunting my growth. And that's what I call the growth trap. I was kind of caught in this trap of like, I had to push through to something else. So when I went to a company by the name of refinance.com, and I had a friend that was there kind of managing the floor. And they were the only company at that point doing business because what they were doing is they were getting portfolios from Wall Street banks and they were refinancing them for like pennies on the dollar. So
Okay.
they were doing all this business in a terrible market because they were taking basically bad paper and rewriting it. Um, so I got an interview with the CEO of the company. And the funny thing about him is that he's one of my business partners now in this company.
Oh,
And
wow.
he was an older guy at the point. He was an ex Wall Street guy. And I went to go see him. And I was like, my like goal was, I was like, I'm going to convince this guy that I should be a manager here. Right. So I go into this interview and I'm like, this is who I am. This is what I did. I was a vice president, all the shit. And looks at me and he's like, that's all great. He's like, you're not a vice president anymore. He's like, you're a loan officer. He's like, if you want a job as a loan officer, I can give you a job. And if you sell, maybe you are a manager soon again. But right now, that's not who you are. And it was just like, it was the reality check I really needed in my life.
Yeah.
It was horrible at the moment, but it was really the reality check I needed. Like, hey, dude, it's time to get back to work. Like, like you're sitting on your hands, you're not doing anything to progress. Like, and it really kicked me. It kicked me back into a very, very hard year of like working and digging out. And I dug out like over the next 3 years, but like, it was really what I needed.
I feel that we all get so comfortable, even in life, working out, whatever it is. When I was at
Yeah, you're right.
when I worked at HedServe, I really wanted to get into real estate. And I said, the best thing that could have happened is if they fired me. Because how was I, like, why would I ever leave? They were paying me. It was a guaranteed paycheck. The only reason why I left is because then ABL gave me a guaranteed paycheck. So that was the only way I was able to make that shift.
Yeah, you jump from guaranteed to guaranteed. And I did the same exact thing. And it doesn't, at the end of the day, you and I know now, because we're in the business for a long time, having to work for your money every single month. And even though I own a business now, it's the profit and loss of the business, right? So I still have to work for my money every single month, but it holds me accountable that I don't get complacent.
Yep.
Like, and that's the most important thing, I feel like.
Yeah, there's no guarantee, right? I tell people all the time, like, I make my follow-ups every day. I don't know what's going to happen. Every day I'm calling somebody, I'm trying to talk to somebody to just generate business. No one's going to do it for you, right? I mean, it's I know you spend a lot of your time, you're out talking to people, you're doing content, you're doing everything you can to put yourself in front of people to build the Cardinal name, the HQ name, so people come in.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the same thing, like branding yourself. Social media has been a big aspect of building a network for me, building a business, helping my salespeople build a business. Like it affords me a lot of things that I wouldn't. But when you're doing branding, what I had to learn is that there is no necessarily return dollar for dollar on investment to what you're doing. Like I can't see it every single day. So I don't get up and say, all right, I put a post up yesterday. It generated 5,000 views. Those 5,000 views generated 3 leads. Those 3 leads, that means much money. It doesn't work like that. So you're kind of I have to put consistent time into it every single day. And I don't know if it's going to come through or not, but I know overall it's a good thing for me. But branding yourself takes a lot of time. Yeah. But I found that it's very, very worth it for a million different reasons. But it's kind of the great unknowns. You have to really believe in yourself and be consistent.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so true that it is a great unknown. You just have to keep doing it because you don't know. Yeah. You can't say. It's not like this is, that post is worth $100,000. I mean, that post might have been nothing. You have no idea. But you know what? It's my mentality is you show up every day, right? Those who show up every day are going to succeed. And they're going to be people who are going to get just generally in this business tired and walk away. But if you show up every day and you make that content and you make those posts and you keep putting it out there, who the heck knows what post it is? I mean, yeah, sure, you'll probably get a viral video and you can be like, oh, that one worked. But you had to put the videos out to get the viral video. Like, it's crazy.
I couldn't agree with you. Somebody asked me recently on a podcast, like, what do you think your superpower is? I'm like, it's a good question, but I think my only superpower is I hold myself accountable religiously and I show up consistently every single day for all the stuff I'm able to hold myself accountable. That's really it. And when I can't hold myself accountable, I find other people to hold me accountable, right? So I get coaches and mentors, and my diet's always a thing with me that I have a hard time sticking with. So I have a nutritionist, and like every single week I got to send them pictures and I have to check in. And do I really need to do it? Probably not, but it's something that frustrates me. So he holds me accountable.
That's interesting. So how do you let somebody else hold you accountable where you could just, you just like, I pay the nutritionist. Like, I don't even need that guy. Like, yeah, I'm going to eat a cheeseburger today and I'm breaking the thing. What's he going to say?
Just that at the end of the week, I think that I have this, this feeling in me that I want to always overachieve whatever the goal is for that week. Right. So like just the fact that I have to speak to him at the end of the week keeps me in check. Like, all right, this guy says I had to lose a pound this week. I had to hit 5 workouts this week. I'm going to make sure I get there. So like, it's how my brain kind of functions, right? Like if somebody sets a plan for me, then I'm always going to try to over exceed expectations. Cause I want it to be, I want it to be a good experience. So that's kind of how I rationalize it in my brain. It probably isn't functional all the time. And that's how I rationalize it to myself.
That's why you're successful though, right? It comes down to those core things, right? And I feel like that's what's breeding my success, at least the foundation of it, is that that is the one thing. I do keep myself accountable to these. I try to make follow-ups. I try to keep calling people and pushing loans. And even if I have nothing to do, I'm calling an attorney to be like, hey, where's that deal? Is there anything I can do? Can I call anybody or do anything? I can't just sit on my hands. It's not possible. And it goes down to anything. Like I'm almost scared to set goals at times, like, because I'll just become so psychopathic about the goal that I'm like, can I handle that pressure on myself right now?
Yeah, I think like that routine, I know every book's going to tell you the same thing, routine, but like it really works. It's like a little thing. It's the little things every single day that kind of push you to success. And I think when you don't do those little things a day, you kind of take a step backwards. Or at least I feel like I do. Maybe everybody doesn't, but I feel like I do.
I totally do too. I mean, if I didn't do it, I'm the kind of person that's like, If I didn't do follow-ups one day and then next month I have a slow month, I'm like, that's why it was a slow month, because
You're right.
I took that day off.
And you're probably right? Like
Yep.
there's probably something that could have happened that day that you just didn't do that day, so you missed it. So, I'm kind of the same way as you are, dude. I'm very boringly routine.
Yeah, and I think that, but it's actually so funny you say that. Very boringly routine. People are looking for something sexy, but the truth is that almost the boringness is what works.
I was listening to a podcast recently, and it was with Ed Milet had on Dean Grazioso, who's like, a big real estate guy. He's had courses. He's done a million different things. And he's like, I guess he's partners with Tony Robbins now, and they're doing this big seminar that he's been doing the last 2 years. But, they both said the same exact thing. It's like, so first, they said two things that I thought were really, really important. Like, the first thing is they just get up every single day and they try to make an inch move forward. Whatever it is, they try to just move forward a little bit. And then they started talking about recession. And it was a big part of the conversation. And the conversation they had about recession is that people, when stuff like this happens, like, I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to do nothing. I'm going to freeze, right? I'm going to do absolutely nothing because the market is down. Who the hell knows what's going to happen? I don't want to make a decision. What they both said is that they were essentially, before the big recession of 2008, they were both nobodies. Nobody knew who they were. They made all their progress in the recession because most people were just like, I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to do nothing. And they just like, we were just doing the same stuff we were doing every single day. We didn't change our routines. And it ended up being massive success for them. And it made a lot of sense to me because if you think about it, during a recession or a downturn in the market, a lot of things are going to happen, right? People are going to exit the market, whatever market you're in. We're in real estate, but people are going to exit the market. People are going to do nothing because they don't know what to do. And they're not going to stick to the routine. So what they said is that there's less competition during recession. So like, this is the time you can make the most progress. But that's just, and it goes back to the same thing. It's like, what can you do every single day to just try to better yourself a little bit? But if you do that, there could be massive rewards, but it's not going to happen overnight. It doesn't, Instagram and social media and all this stuff has made us look for, hey, we need instant gratification. Nothing good happens instantly. It all happens over long periods of time. And I think that's where we're kind of we all get lost a little bit in what goes on in society at this point now, because we think that it's going to happen immediately. None of it happens immediately.
And when you actually look at things that happen immediately for people, they lose it quicker. Like anybody who wins the lottery, how do so many people who win the lottery go broke? Because they never had to work for their money. They got $100 million and they blew $100 million and they're back to where they were because they didn't have underlying principles to keep them going every day. That's
a great analogy, dude. You're right. And they got it quick. They lost it quick, right? I'm sure people have easier lives than me and you because we torture ourselves. But it's kind of how I function and how I like to function. I feel like if I'm making progress every single day, whatever it is, it could be anything, right? I could just get better at, I don't know. I could be better at preparing my food in the morning. I did it faster than I did yesterday. Like I feel positive about it.
Yeah, it's a small little win. It doesn't have to, again, it doesn't have to be financially win, right? For us, it's just as long as we're winning and moving forward, it keeps that foundation and that routine of our winning and moving forward.
It gives us healthy momentum, right? Yeah. It just gives you healthy momentum, right? Any step backwards, you lose your momentum. So like, I think it just gives you healthy momentum.
I love that, healthy momentum. That's perfect. Yeah. I feel like when people go into a recession and you're hearing about who's the guy, Patrick David Bev, is that his? He always talks about like, this is the time to prepare, be prepared. I feel like everybody looks to money, right? Like, wait, it's a recession, I'm losing money. I do think though that more importantly, as you're saying, it's the skill set, right? So when people are going to exit the market, and yes, we might have less money to do things with because our property values have come down, people aren't buying as many mortgages, whatever the case is. But if you keep making those phone calls and doing those things during the recession, it is how you grow. There's so much money out here, like just generally, and there is so much money. If you keep making your phone calls, like during COVID, I met a new lender. I just called every day. He had money. He ended up doing a bunch of deals for me during COVID when nobody else was lending. I didn't have any money. I didn't expect to get that, but you call, and that's the recession. I might lose money, but you might not lose money. And you and I connect, we start a business. Bang.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's I think the pandemic, the beginning of that was a really good example of everything, right? Because I was sitting in my office by myself. The mortgage industry for a few months was really, really scary. It had completely frozen. Nobody knew what was going on. And I'm like, I said to everybody before they had to send them home from the office because we were closing it, I was just like, look, whatever we do, we just have to move forward, right? Like we're not going to freeze. We're not going to stand still. And I started coming in and looking more at my stock portfolio, which I wasn't doing before, which was terrible this year, but it was great last year or the last 2 years. And I started focusing more time on that. And then I started looking at a hole in the market with Airbnb properties because a lot of Airbnb properties couldn't rent. So a lot of them disappeared, and I started looking at them like, well, this may be a strategy that I can take advantage of because I could buy these properties now, and now as demand picks back up, and that's what I did. And it wasn't by accident, but it wasn't completely planned out either, right? But I started buying properties for short-term rentals, and that ended up being a good strategy. But if I would have just said, you know what, I'm gonna go sit in my house. It's COVID. I'm not doing nothing. I'm gonna just be what everybody else is doing. I was like, I got to find a way to keep moving forward. And those are the two things I found during that time period that gave me, I had very, very good success over the last 2 years. And now this year is a down year, right? Like, and I talk to people all the time. They're like, I feel like my career is going backwards. I feel like the business is going backwards. I said, this is a cycle. This is just a cycle like this, right? But I guarantee if you keep your momentum moving forward, you just get up every single day and do the same things. You go to the same networking events. You still try to meet new people. You still try to bring new business in, just like you did with that investor, right? Same thing. If you do that now, when the business gets busy again, because it will, this economy runs in cycles, you're going to have more momentum than everybody, and you're going to be so far ahead of everybody that they're going to have a hard time catching up. But if you stop, then you have to restart it, and it's going to be very, very difficult. So, just like little things like that, I think equal success, but it's the little things you do every single day again.
Yep. And like you said, it is the cycles, right? So people are going to fall out of the market. And if you keep trying to stay in the market, when the market comes back, you're going to be the one that they were talking to the whole time when the market was bad. You're going to be the one posting content the whole time when the market was bad.
Yep.
And they're going to say, oh, wow, now I want to buy a house. Oh, geez, all I've seen is Ralph all over. Let me give him a call. Like, I'm going to get a mortgage.
Yeah, 100%. You become the authority. And that's why I always tell people with social media. I teach a social media class for realtors and loan officers. I do a seminar probably every couple of months about it. And the first thing I tell people all the time on their branding and the social media, and when you're speaking to people outwardly, don't ever lead with fear, right? Educate people, but don't make them scared. So I always try, like I'm talking about now, like what's going to happen with the real estate market. So I always do the same three things every single time. It's like, all right, let's look at the history of real estate. History of real estate, average rates of this. History of rent. Rent goes up at least 10% every single year. History of prices. This is how the rate runs, right? That's what the history is, right? This is where we are now. Where we are right now is overpriced homes are not going to sell. If you don't price the home right, it's not going to sell right now, and you're going to see price drops because of it. And then we can talk about what the future is going to be. But I don't want to tell you, listen, we're in a recession. Prices are going to drop 20%. Rates are up. Homes are unaffordable. Like, I'm scaring the crap out of you, and I'm not giving you the whole story. I'm giving you a piece of the story. Let me give you all the facts so you can at least feel secure that, like, look, this is a normal cycle. This is what could happen. This is the risk. But ultimately, real estate's been one of the best investments ever for the last 40 years. Ultimately, it's going to be okay, but you have to realize that as you go through the process.
It's interesting that you're saying that because you do have a big brand, right? And you've got a fair amount of followers on Instagram, right? We've talked about this before in the past about being truthful on Instagram. Don't be someone else, right? So you see a lot of people though who are pushing that fear and are eating up that fear. Should have had more money. Market's going to blow up. Rates are going to go up. Inflation. Oh, CPI is coming. I bet it's going to be a point. It should be 3. Like, there are these guys that are just pushing fear.
Yep.
You're pushing.
Right.
I mean, I've been watching your stuff. You're pushing more of, guys, this is what's happening in the market. Positive stuff. Like, you have definitely a different attitude toward it. So how is your following? I'm sure you keep track of some sort of statistics. Yeah. Are you increasing faster than you were before by being positive in somewhat of a negative time?
Yeah. I'm definitely getting a lot more engagement, like 100% getting a lot more engagement. And then some people like I put something up the other day, like, hey, we're in a high inflationary period. How did we get here? Well, these are the facts of how we got here. Like, this is the real facts, right? And then I put something else up that this is where home prices were 20 years ago. This is where rates 20 years ago. This is what it is. And some guy responded back, yeah, but wages aren't increasing 500%. Like houses increased. I'm like, well, that's not what happened. Houses were up. Actually, the average home sale price across the country was in 2019 was 389,000. The average home sale price last year was 460,000. Yes, major increase, but it's not even 30%, right, dude? It's right. It's 15, 20%. What does that mean? This year, the average home sale price is about 417,000. So we're down a little bit, but it's still, if you look at it over time, 2018, 2019, 2020. These are normal increases. We had a little bit of a spike because of bidding wars, but like, it's not a reason to panic. This isn't a market crash. This is a recession. And that's the other thing I put up. A recession is not a market crash. There's two totally different things.
Yeah.
And by the way, you find what a recession is, right? It's 2 down fiscal quarters essentially in a row. a market crash, there is no definitive definition for it. It's not like, oh, if it's over 30% drop, it's a market crash. There is no definitive definition for it. So people calling it a market crash are essentially just trying to put fear out there,
Yep.
because there is no even such thing as a definition. There's no definition for market crash. So you're calling it a market crash and you don't even know what that means.
Right.
So that's kind of where I try to avoid that stuff and just kind of tell people, like, look, this is the reason you should be cautious, but at the same time, this is the history of it.
Which is why, again, goes back to our basic mentality, is that if you always do the little things, you'll be fine. So if you're a real estate investor and you always buy, you'll be fine. I've talked to so many people who have said during COVID, prices went up so much, I'm going to wait till they come back. And I said, well, how about this? If prices went up 20% last year, you don't want to buy because they're going to come back. But now if they come down 10%, you're a buyer. Well, you should have bought the year before, because you would have caught, you'd be up, but now you waited because it came down. So you're a buyer. However, if you're the guy that buys one a year, you bought one when it was at 0, you bought one when it was at 20, you bought one when it was at -10, but still +10 on the other side, you're still a winner. I just don't,
and the thing with that, dude, is that it's like, it's two things, right? It's, first of all, interest rates are up, yes, but they're still very, very cheap comparatively historically. And I know everybody doesn't want to hear that, but whether the interest rate is 10% or it's 3%, you should have a budget. You should decide if that home you're buying fits your budget, your monthly budget, because that's what you have to pay every single month. You're not paying the rate on the wall or the rate somebody else got or the rate, and the rate in history. $5,000 a month is what I can afford. I'm gonna get this house is gonna cost me $5,000 a month. Great. The truth of the matter is that homes will appreciate in most markets between 8 and 10% a year, right? So you're always gaining as long so I'm looking at the real estate market like this right now, right? So am I buying? Yes, I'm always looking to buy, and this is how I look at it. I have a 3 to 5 year plan pretty much on all my investment properties that I buy, right? That's what I really want my initial investment back on, especially on the short term stuff, within 5 years, 5 to 7 years on the longer term stuff, but on the short term stuff, 3 to 5 years. With this mortgage payment, with the income I'm making on the property, can I get my investment back in 5 years? That's my plan, right? If that's the case, then all right, then whether the interest rate's 6% or 2%, I still have the right plan in place because my interest rate's not going to change. It's a fixed rate. So I'm always going to, and is this property a good buy for that reason? Where do I see this property being in 5 years? Well, there may be a dip in the market over the next 12 months, but in 5 years, this is a good neighborhood. Values will appreciate. I'm not going to get hurt. It's going to gain value. That you have to have a definitive plan and then make your assumptions based around that, not what the news is reporting.
Completely agree. I mean, I tell people, I don't care whether the rate's 10 or 20%. What's my cash flow, right? Because as long as I can rent it for more than what the mortgage is, it doesn't matter. I mean, yes, a residential person might look at that differently, but it's going to kind of still be the same theory as you're saying, right? Because it's your budget, right? So you're going to look back to your budget. If rates are 20%, well, if I can only afford $5,000 a month, what does that mean? I'll buy that.
Yeah, and I think with buying a house, you're going to have to say, when you bought your first property, you had to make some kind of sacrifices to now afford this additional risk and or payment. We make compromises every single time we buy real estate or anything else major, right? For the purposes. So what are you willing to compromise to get the house, right? Like, and maybe the compromise is larger now than it was before because it's a higher payment, but it's still a compromise, right? So if you really want it, what are you willing to compromise to get it? But I mean, I have crypto, I have NFT, I have stocks, I have a little bit of everything. When I look at my portfolio in general, real estate is still the safest investment. And I think now that there's all this additional stuff you can invest in, real estate will become the new gold. It will become the new treasury note. It will become the most secure asset. And I put something up in my Instagram recently. Elon Musk, who says crazy stuff, but he's a smart guy, obviously. He tweeted out that during recessionary times, it's always smartest to own physical goods, something physical, including real estate. Now, this is somebody who talks about how he doesn't own anything, right? He doesn't own real estate, but he was even saying that during high recession. And so I was like, all right, that's an interesting statement. Why is he saying that? Let me go do some research on it, and I did. And if you look at stuff, homes that already existed, so that were going to be resold because they already existed, or they were going to be rehabbed and sold, not new builds, always are more valuable during recessionary periods because you don't have to worry about new material costs going up. You don't have to worry about the great unknown. It's a physical asset that already exists that you're buying and you know the value of. So what he said made a lot of sense to me. I was like, all right, well, this is really based off of history, makes sense. And the other thing too, if you look at Warren Buffett and how he invests, he always invests based off the long-term value of something, right? Not the evaluation, not oh well, Uber is a company. I'm putting an evaluation of 10 billion on it in 20 years. He looks at, hey, if I buy Apple, who has a product which is an iPhone, what is the physical value based off of regular inflationary numbers? Does the cost of their product that they're making still go up over the next few years? And if that does, is the company worth more? Yes. Okay, great. That's a good investment for me. Like,
Yep.
you know, so if you look at those two things, real estate fits both categories of guys who have made billions of dollars, right? So
Yep.
I tend to try to follow the smart people.
And that's absolutely a good point. Follow the smart people, right? Don't
Yeah,
reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of guys who've made a lot of money doing this stuff, and it's just easy enough to follow them. And one thing I like that Warren Buffett says, kind of to which helps me feel better about my cash flow, is he says, like, you know, when you don't say to your neighbor, hey, what are you selling your house for, right? Like, you're not every day, you're not saying, oh, my house is 600, oh, it's 605 today, now it's
yeah. It's
595
not a
today,
stock.
right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
exactly. So it helps you keep that a little bit better, where I think that too many people get caught up on this. What is my thing worth? Right? I mean, obviously I want to have values go up, but again, it doesn't really matter as long as it's cash flowing, right? If it cash flows, it could be
Agreed.
worth 300 or it could be worth $1 million. Of course, the higher it's worth, the more I can maybe take some money out, do something, buy another, right? You have that option, right? But just keeping things just in a vacuum, like, it's about cash flow. So if it's
Yep.
making money, who cares what it's worth? The market could pull back 20%. I don't really care as long as my cash flow is there.
No, it's funny because even now, like, so I have properties and I'm looking at selling one of them right now, and I think it's a good time to sell it. But I look at it and the property was cash flowing, and I'm like, I got to look at this. You know what I mean? Like I know it's worth $200,000 more than I paid for it, 18 months ago, but it's still cash flowing. So where do I think and that property made sense for me to sell, but I have to, if something cash flows, but that means you're getting a rate of return on your money, right? You're earning interest on your money. Like the best investors of the world, right? Warren Buffett in his lifetime has only made about 10%, between 10 and 12% on his investments. And this is the guy, the billionaire,
But
right?
yeah,
Like, I want you to think about that. If you invest $100,000 into a home, you're buying real estate, to make 10% of a year, you only need to make $10,000 a year on that $100,000 investment. So essentially, you would only have to make a little bit less than about $800, $850 a month to make in profit and cash flow to make 10% on your money. That's a pretty, like, I think it's a
that's
pretty reliable asset. That's an
yeah.
easy thing to do, right? So, I just, real estate is going to always, whether I was in the business or not, I just feel like it is the easiest asset to figure out as far as long term, and it's safe. It's safer than most things.
This wealthy guy that I bring loans to, he's kind of become a little bit of a mentor to me. And we talk about what I should do with money, how should I refi. And he even says, like, so I'm moving into this loan at it's going to be 6.875. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I should only take 70%. I'll leave some money in, right? My rents will be higher. He said, no, pull out the extra 5%, go to 75. He says, now you can take that money that you're borrowing at, let's round numbers, 7%. He said, go lend that money at 12%, because you just
Yeah,
made
he's right.
5% on your money. And
Make the
what's
difference.
otherwise it's
Yeah,
stuck in that house. You can't do anything with it.
it's a
So
really good point.
that is like, I never look at those things. I'm like, well, then my rents will be more, I'll be safer. He's like, stop with that stuff. Like, you want to talk about making money. It is like, it kind of gets to that point where I've always thought, okay, I have a job, I save $3,000 a month, and then I can put in the stock market. All right, now that 3,000 makes me, $30 a month. But if you can take that 30 and invest that somewhere else, and you have money that's made you money, that's making you money, like, that to me is like, that's like where the rich are really there. They're really rich when they're
You're right.
like, that's kind of the FU money at that point.
Yeah, because when your money's always working for you. You know what I mean? In the last 2 years, I really made a strong push to buy more properties, right? And in my brain, and it's easy. It's easy. I've been in the business for a long time, but at the same time, even being in the business for a long time, I hadn't been buying properties the way I was doing the last 2 years. So I was out of practice. I got to get back to it. Things can go wrong, but at the end of the day, it covers up a lot of mistakes too. Like I can make mistakes and still make money. Like if I make a mistake, it's not going to be the end of me. Like we've had conversations. You've bought properties that you were like, this is more work than I thought it was going to be. Like this was a bigger project than I thought it was going to be. But I can almost guarantee that you salvaged every one of those projects, and you didn't lose money.
Yep.
Maybe you
it's
broke
like,
even. You know what I mean? But you didn't lose money.
I felt like I lost money at the time, like you said, because you put so much money into it. But now
Yeah.
that property that we specifically spoke about is actually one of my best cash flowing properties. And I make like $2,000 a month off that property. And at the time, it was like the world was coming to an end. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I did this to myself. This is crazy. But, and you're right, it does. If you can take a step back and be patient, real estate many times does fix itself.
It's a really good quote, Ed. Real estate fixes itself.
Yep. You just have to be patient, though. You have to be patient with it, right? That's it.
I bought a property in 05 or 06 in Florida. At the time, I was flipping. In Florida, the strategy before the crash was that you could buy properties pre-construction and sell them before they were even finished. So I was doing that. Like, that's what everybody was doing, right? I was buying them pre-construction, and then the value was going up because everything was moving so fast. So like,
yeah.
But I got caught holding the bag on a couple.
Mm-hmm.
So one of them I got caught holding the bag on. I paid like $230 for, I think. During the market crash, it was worth like $70,000. So like 30 cents on the dollar, right?
Yeah.
I was like, this is a nightmare. I kept it because I hold a license, a financial license, so I can't foreclose because I have to show financial responsibility.
Okay.
So it was kind of between a rock and a hard place. Like, I couldn't just let my properties go. So I kept it. I should have sold it, but I kept it. Anyway, long story short is I paid it off like about 2 years ago. It makes me about $2,000 a month. It's worth about $270,000. So it's not worth a lot more than I paid for it, but it is worth more than I paid for it, right? And it generates income for me long term, right? I outran my stupidity and my mistakes. Like, I was able to outrun it in real estate, and I made a stupid mistake, but I was able to outrun it by figuring out how to make it work over time.
And again, you learned from that mistake, but it didn't really cost you any money because over the long term, you learned from it, right? And
short-term pain. Yeah, short-term pain.
During that time, was the renter covering the mortgage that you had even at that higher?
It was a disaster,
you lost every month?
No, I was so I was at a point where I was so broke that I was just able to pay the mortgage. So I wasn't able to pay the maintenance fees or the taxes I was paying, but I wasn't paying the maintenance fees. So at some point, the association reaches out to, like, if you don't stop paying your maintenance fees, we're going to put your property in conservatorship, and we're going to collect the rent and put it towards your maintenance fees. I was like, do what you got to do. You know what I mean? Like, because I don't have the money. You can't get blood from the stone. So I was just like, I can't not paying my mortgage. And my mortgage reports to my credit. The maintenance doesn't report to the credit. So that's the obvious thing. So what ended up happening is that they took it over. They started taking they got a renter in there because I was having a hard time getting a renter, and they got a renter in there. They started collecting money, and my money was going to a receiver. I ended up making friends with the receiver. He's an attorney based out of Florida. When I paid it off, I paid off all the back rent, all the back maintenance I owed. He became my management company. And still to this day, 15 years later, he's my management company. He finds renters for me. He gets people in there. So I turned the negative into a positive, but it was not, I had to make a decision at some point. What can I afford to pay and what can I not afford to pay? I was like, well, I got to pay my mortgage. So I'm going to stop paying the maintenance fees and see what happens. And basically what happened is that they just took my rent until I got caught up.
It's funny that I'm glad you told that story because, you're a successful guy, you're running multiple businesses here. Someone looks at you and goes, how does he do that? I could never handle that, right? But it's like what is David Goggins talks about callousing, right? Like you have calloused your mind by I don't recommend somebody go through what you went through in that house, but that taught you grit and calloused you that now when you run into problems, you're like, okay, I've been through worse. Let's take a step back. Maybe the guy next to me thinks this is the worst thing in the world, but I know how to handle this. I can do this. I've been through this. And I know and I've learned that if I just hang on, I'm going to be all right. And that's when they talk about how people get rich, right? Because you'll hang on to a problem, which will make you very wealthy at the end of the day. Where someone else would run away from that problem and say, I just can't handle it. I can't handle it.
You're right. And that's a really good point. I think the hard times I went through were the best thing that ever happened to me. It felt like death at the time. It was really dark, but now it was the best thing that ever happened to me because you're right. It basically hardened me to all the things that could go wrong today. And I'm having a problem right now. I'm selling a property. It's in Florida. Florida is a state where you have to get a 4-point inspection. The insurance then in Florida is a nightmare. To get a homeowner's insurance is a complete nightmare. And to get homeowner's insurance, you have to have a 4-point inspection on your property that says that the roof has a certain amount of life on it. Now, that used to be a year. Now, because of values being up and all the stuff, the insurance companies down there want it to be good for at least 5 years. Wow. So essentially, the inspection was done on my property by 2 different inspectors. They both said the same thing. It's got less than a 3-year shelf life, even though I've never had an issue with it. So now I got to rip the roof off and replace it, or somebody's not going to be able to get insurance. So I agree to replace the roof. Permits, weather, everything's delaying this roof getting finished. I paid for the roof and the permit the day I found out about it. Anyway, now I'm getting to a point now where the contract's about to run out. They're trying to back out of the deal because it's taking too long. So again, but I have enough knowledge and history in the business where I was able to keep them in the deal. I gave a little bit more. I did this, I did that, but I could have been like, this sucks, dude. I don't know. What am I going to do with this property? Let me just fire sale it. I'll give it away. Right. But that would have been stupid because it's still a valuable asset. But I've learned from the horrible mistakes I've made in the past. Eventually that turns into a positive. In this situation, it's helping me navigate this situation.
It's so true. Those hard times do become who you are. And being that we are short-term focused as humans, like they are the worst thing. The world's never going to end, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But you come out of it better on the other side, and it all works out in the end.
Always, bro. Yeah, completely.
So what's up? What's next for you? What are you going to do? What's your plan from here, right? Where are we going?
Good question. So I got a couple of things that are kind of present day that I'm working on, and then I have something like over the next 6 months I'm working on. So I just had a book that released 2 days ago. It's called The Growth Trap. It's on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble. It's on Target. The ebook came out. The actual hard copy of the book is coming out in November, but you can get the ebook now. And The Growth Trap is essentially when we're born, and this is from like infancy till early adulthood, we kind of grow automatically, right? We get bigger, we get stronger, we get smarter. We kind of soak up all the knowledge around us really, really easily because there's nothing else in our brain. So we're really easy. We learn things easily and we grow easily. We get to a point in life, and for me, it kind of happened in high school, then it happened again in college, and then it happened 100 other times. I got to a point where I had to force growth, and I didn't know how to do it. So I got stuck, right? So the book is essentially about my story and a lot of other successful people's stories about how they got stuck in these growth traps because they stopped intentionally growing. So we go through techniques that they use to get around them and what you have to look out for to recognize you're in a growth trap. And that's what the book is about. So I'm working on, that's kind of just being released. I'm actually going to record the audio book after I finish with you.
Awesome.
I have an Airbnb course that kind of goes, I bought about 15 Airbnb properties over the last 2 years. So I have a course that I released. It's called The Next Real Estate Gold Rush. It's the nextrealestategoldrush.com. That it's a $997 to basically go through what I went through for the last 2 years, right? How I bought the properties, how I furnished them, how I made them smart homes, my check-in instructions, my check-out instructions. If you have any interest in short-term rentals, and I'm continuing down that path because I'm seeing a lot higher rate of return on those properties, even though it's a lot more work. But the course kind of explains that. So we're starting a free webinar in September based around the course. So I'm going to be doing once a month webinar to as many people as I can get into it to speak about this, that form of investing. And then ultimately, I'm working on a fund to invest with me on the properties that I own already and that I'm going to be buying. So I'm working on a fund that I'm hoping to release last quarter this year, first quarter of next year, where you're going to be able to invest in my short-term rental properties as little as $1,000 investment to get in. And essentially the fund's going to pay dividends in two different ways. It's going to pay dividends through rental income or if the properties are sold. So that's the kind of all the stuff I have out in the universe right now that I'm working on.
Oh, and by the way, you run a mortgage company.
Yeah, I still run a mortgage company.
That's your side hustle, right?
Yeah, I mean, mortgages is kind of always going to be my thing, and it's a business that I'm always going to be involved in. And we have about 100 salespeople, about 200 employees at this point now. We did almost $2 billion last year, so it's definitely my main gig still. But I kind of always talk about what I'm working on actively at the moment, and those are the three things besides mortgages that I'm working on.
No, but I love that because that is what it is, right? It's your job, right?
Yeah.
Your Cardinal's kind of your job, and then this is the stuff that's going to push you to the next level, and Cardinal's just feeding that at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. Thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So how can we will put all your links to your book and to your site in our notes, but how can we find you as well?
So Instagram is always the best place for me. That's where I'm the most active. It's at Dibug, D-I-B-U-G. And then my website has everything. You can get in contact with me a million different ways. And that's just my name, ralphdibugnara.com.
Awesome. Thanks, Ralph. Really appreciate it. Good luck in your future. And everybody, buy his book, check his course out. I just want to say one last thing about these courses. They always seem expensive, but like Ralph said today, he's going to save you a ton of money. It took him 2 years, and it's going to cost you $1,000. I guarantee it's costing tens of thousands to learn that course.
Correct. Yeah,
So
definitely. A lot of mistakes in there. Yeah, for sure.
awesome. All right. Thanks, Ralph. I appreciate it.
Thanks, dude.
We'll be in touch, man.
I appreciate you. Thanks, brother.
Anytime. Bye.